How do people endure the unthinkable? And how do they do it for a decade? These aren't hypothetical questions for Syria's people. It's their reality. March 15 marks a decade since the Syrian civil war began. It's estimated that at least 400,000 people were killed in the first 5 years. And about half of Syria's pre-war population has been displaced by fighting. And throughout it all, Syria's Bashar al Assad has clung onto power. In 2012, the Obama administration predicted that the regime's days were numbered. In the early years of the conflict, there were repeated calls from the international community for Assad to step down to pave the way for a political solution and lasting peace. The regime's leader has stayed put with the backing of Russia and Iran. And this year, there are plans for a presidential election.
Assad will hold his own elections to make sure he wins. To convey that Syria is at peace, that reconstruction should begin and sanctions be lifted, and that we should recognize that he won. Nothing else would be a bigger mistake.
Assad and his regime continue to be frozen out by most of the international community. That's been done both politically and financially through the form of sanctions.
He has done absolutely nothing to regain the legitimacy that he has lost through the brutal treatment of his own people. There is no question of the U.S. normalizing relations with his government anytime soon.
But there are also signs of a diplomatic attitude shift towards Assad, with a potential olive branch coming from the United Arab Emirates.
It is very important for Syria to return to its role in the Arab League.
It's a position that would have been untenable 10 years ago, when the League suspended Syria for the regime's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protesters. But now it's an indication of both how much and how little has changed since 2011.
After a decade of conflict, in the middle of a global pandemic, and faced with a steady stream of new crises, Syria has fallen off the front page. And yet, the situation remains a living nightmare.
Syria is in the grip of an economic crisis, and its effects have been devastating. It's estimated that 80% of the population lives in poverty. The World Food Programme says people are closer to starvation today than ever before. In the last year alone, food prices have doubled.
My sales have really dropped around 50% because of the increase in prices. Sometimes people even buy pieces of a vegetable because they can't afford a whole one.
It's meant caring for the family is that much harder for people like widow and mother of 8, Mohammed.
We haven't had meat since Eid Adha in July last year. And when I go to the market, I can only look at the vegetables because they are so expensive.
If providing the basics of life is this hard for one family, it gives you an idea of just how difficult it will be to rebuild homes, towns, and cities. But all of that seems like a task for the distant future, because any sense of political urgency to find a lasting peace appears long faded. Natalie Perhanen, The Newsmakers.